Besides Putin's active history of persecution of queer communities and individuals, there's been active persecution of ethnic and religious minorities throughout Russia and the former Soviet Union, whose legacy and identity Putin sees as being continuous with the identity of modern-day Russia. I fear most for individuals who live at the intersection of multiple vulnerable identities. Anti-gay purges in Chechnya have involved the use of forced disappearances, torture, extrajudicial killing, and imprisonment in camps. These attacks have been denied by Russian and Chechen authorities. Besides the current situation, Russia has inherited a legacy of violence and persecution of ethnic and religious minority groups. In the 1940s, the Soviet government forcibly resettled hundreds of thousands of members of ethnic minority groups, including Crimean Tatars and Chechens. These deportations are now recognized as genocide by several nations, including Ukraine, but not Russia. The estimated death toll for Soviet programs of forced resettlement is well over 1 million, a legacy with which Russia has not remedied or appropriately grappled with. The majority of people who left the Crimean Peninsula after Russia's illegal annexation were Crimean Tatars too, so this legacy is still fresh. Putin's assault on religious and ethnic minorities continues today in other ways as well. Last month, Russian missiles damaged the memorial site of Babin Yar, which is one of the largest mass killings of Jews during World War II occurred. His attacks are literally erasing a history of genocide. If he has his way now, he will erase histories of persecution, and he will literally disappear people whose existence contradicts his program of heteronormative, patriarchal, and ethnically Russian hegemony. If there's one thing you take home today, let it be this: Ukraine is a queer issue. The invasion of Ukraine is not a situation that we can accept. There's no safety for the queer community under a Putin regime, and we must fight and stand in solidarity with our queer siblings and members of all other vulnerable groups. Putin has no respect for human rights. We must speak loudly and forcibly to denounce him, and we cannot concede anything. I urge you to call and write to your representatives to demand the temporary protected status for all queer Ukrainians who are able to make it to the U.S., commitment to long-term funding to help rebuild Ukraine, including LGBTQI+ spaces destroyed by the war, and full economic sanctions and maximum military support for Ukraine until all Ukrainian lands are reclaimed. Enough is enough. And I'm gonna end by reading a poem. It's so hard to find words for what is so unspeakable. So I'm gonna read a poem by Anastasia Afanasieva, a physician and poet from Kharkiv. It's in translation. It's called Can There Be Poetry After? Can there be poetry after Яснувата, Горлівка, Савур Могила, Novoazovsk, after Krasny Luch, Donetsk, Luhansk, after sorting bodies in repose from the dying, the hungry from those on a stroll, long after poetry dissolves into babbling, lips mating in the darkness, I ask, half awake, is poetry possible at the moment history stirs, once its steps reverberate through every heart? Impossible to speak of anything else. Talking becomes impossible. As I write this, very close to me, every hope is being ended.
Thank you.
Слава Україні!
Hi everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Elena Globa. I'm from Kiev in Ukraine. Thanks God, my son-in-law homily, and P-flag, I'm in a safe place right now. But I spent 6 days in hell, and they were the most horrible days of my entire life. And I failed to find words to describe what Ukrainians are coming through right now. And most of them are still there. And I'm here because I know that this is the right thing to do under the circumstances. I know I'm addressing the most advanced part of American society, and I know it's hard to find time. It's hard to sacrifice your relaxing day. But right now, the whole world, we all are facing the fatal, devastating event of our life and threat. And prevention is better than finding yourself in a dark, dusty basement. We're traveling with fear and counting explosions outside. At the beginning of February, I was enjoying my evening in a restaurant with my friend, drinking wine. On the 23rd of February, our project manager and I were planning the activities of civil organization Parents Initiative Derga. On the 2nd of March, I locked my apartment and ran for my life. And so guys, I managed to find the rescue place, but if Putin comes, if we allow to Putin come, there won't be an escape place under the sun for any one of us. And so that's good that we have people who understand the situation, who can analyze and who can predict. In my Ukrainian former life, I was working very hard to establish LGBTQ human rights in Ukraine. We as human rights activists were pushing very hard to achieve our goals. But, we are early, we are young democracy, and sometimes not all processes are very fast, especially in part on the government. But LGBTQ plus people who are fighting right now, who are staying with Ukraine, find that they may have their better future with Ukraine. And we value their sacrifice and their tribute to the government and President Zelensky. LGBT people do not keep grudges. They are an important part of the nation. Woo! And I want you all start talking with your friends, colleagues, relatives, and we all right now should become human rights activists.
That's right.
Let's support Ukraine with weapons, with non-fly zone, maybe fighting with her. And then Americans, we have a chance to have their wine evenings and lives, their homes, apartments intact. Glory to Ukraine!
Glory to heroes!
I want to thank QUA for organizing this, and Bogdan especially. To be going through everything that you're going through right now, and to escape Kyiv and come here and organize a rally and speak bravely and truthfully in front of everybody, I can't even imagine what kind of bravery that takes. I consider myself an activist here in the US. My name's Jeremiah Johnson. I do HIV/AIDS and queer activism. But I've never had to show that kind of bravery, and I'm so grateful to know you, and thank you for all of this. Grateful to everyone who showed up, people who are showing ACT UP translated into Russian. We have HRC here to speak today to help talk to the important issue that this is for human rights and that this is a queer issue more broadly. And make no mistake, Putin is a fucking homophobe. He is a fucking transphobe. He has been throwing queer people under the bus for years to fuel his hate-filled regime. So when he comes into a sovereign country that has decidedly moved toward democracy and toward human rights, that is a queer fucking issue. Fuck yes. And that's what we want to talk about here today. Because we're going to keep hearing all of these important stories about Ukrainians surviving under impossible circumstances. But we have to keep also in mind those queer Ukrainians who are being driven from their safe spaces and their safe communities. And they need additional protections. All of Ukraine needs a long-term commitment from the United States to protect and rebuild Ukraine and fortify it and make sure that it is fully defended going forward. Because even if this initial assault stops, and we don't know that that's the case, I should say for a minute why I'm up here speaking. I've got talking points, but I'm completely off script. I had the privilege of living in Ukraine for 17 months as a Peace Corps volunteer from 2006 to 2008. I lived among the people. I taught Ukrainian students. And in that time there, I learned so much about the resilience and the beauty of these people. We'd just come off of the Orange Revolution. Thousands of Ukrainians had come together in Kyiv in order to denounce Russian meddling in an election there, to decidedly say that Ukraine will not be in Russia's sphere of dictatorship going forward. And I saw that same hunger for change and that same passion within my students. And right now, as I hear these stories and as I hear the war getting closer and closer to the oblast that I was in Odessa Oblast, I think about my students right now, and I worry about them. And if they are fighting back against Putin right now, or working hard to get their families safe, I am proud of them, and I pray for them. I had the good fortune of meeting Bogdan back in 2014. We were introduced by Peter Staley, who's a prominent queer activist here in the United States. And so when this went down, I was very happy to connect with Bogdan to try and raise the specific issues of queer people in this space. When I went back to Ukraine in 2016, I was amazed at the degree to which human rights and the fight for queer people had advanced. When I was there in 2006 as a gay man, it was difficult. I was in the closet. I had some connections to the queer community, but they were largely inaccessible to me. By 2016, I was visiting a friend who was gay. He was living in Vinnytsia and openly dating a gay Ukrainian man. When I went back to Odessa, I saw that the queer nightlife there was more visible than before, not without challenges, but it was growing. And when I went to Kyiv, I met up with Bogdan, and he showed me the organization that he had founded. He told me about the movement growing there. I heard about how he testified in front of parliament there to talk about what it's like to be a gay man in Ukraine. That movement, that progress is threatened right now. Anywhere that Russia expands, anywhere that Putin expands right now, is going to threaten queer people further. We have to contain the sphere of hatred, and we have to ensure that we are protecting queer Ukrainians in particular. So if there's something that you take away from this today that we want to make sure that you carry with you, Ukraine is a queer issue. We need to ensure that for queer Ukrainians that manage to make it to the US, because there are queer organizers here in the US from Ukraine, and there's a community here for them, that they have full protections as we ensure that all Ukrainian refugees have protections right now. We want the good example of HRC showing up here today, and we want the larger queer movement to be covering this as a queer issue on a daily basis. Absolutely. We can't say that we stand for queer rights, say that we stand for human rights, and not raise this up. And it needs to be a daily issue. And I'm going to take the win as a dramatic sign that I'm right.
Yes, you are.
And finally, we have to commit to a long-term investment, not only to build all of Ukraine. Americans, we have a short attention span. We can't with this. There's too much at stake. We fucked up as a country. We told Ukraine that we would have their backs. But instead, since 2014, since the illegal annexation of Crimea, we have not stood up behind Ukraine. We did not ensure Ukraine's safety in all of this, when we should have been pushing back against Putin and everything he was doing to Ukraine, everything he was doing to queer people, every day, every hour, every minute, every second.
Bravo!
So we need to be in this for the long term, to protect Ukraine, to defend Ukraine, to rebuild Ukraine, and to ensure that we are rebuilding the queer spaces that have been disrupted and destroyed by this senseless, inept, clumsy asshole of a dictator. And we need to be there for queer Ukrainians. So please take that with you, raise that message, raise this as a queer issue, and ensure that we are protecting all Ukrainians, including those who are even further marginalized. Thank you so much.
Bravo, Україні!
Sanitizing break.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Jean Friedberg. I'm the Director of Global Partnerships at the Human Rights Campaign. And I'm so thrilled to be with you today. And I know that I speak for my colleagues and for our members, our 3 million members and supporters all across the country, when they say that we are standing with Ukraine, we're standing with LGBTQ plus Ukraine. So thank you very much. Bogdan, I want to thank you for all you're doing day after day, even before this crisis, to raise the issue of LGBTQ plus people in Ukraine. And I want to say a special welcome, and we're so grateful that you're here, to Elena, Bogdan's mom, who we honored in 2016 as one of a brave advocate and ally for LGBT issues. So thank you, wonderful to be here, and I'm honored to be standing in front of you. So by showing up here today, all of you are sending a message to the inhabitants of this great house behind us that you care, that these issues are important, that all Ukrainians and LGBTQ Ukrainians deserve the protection of the United States, and everything that we can do to support them in their struggle against this aggression, and to ensure that people who want to leave are able to leave and come to the United States, where they can find safety and refuge. At HRC, we are doing whatever we can to show up, to stand up and support, both in spirit and practically, our partners in Ukraine and the region. I myself have been there a number of times over the past 3 years and have gotten to know the amazing advocates from Kiev, from Kharkiv, from Zaporizhia, from Lviv, and in many other places across the country. And they, I can tell you, are an incredible community of brave, creative, talented, vivacious, what can I say? Every word to talk about folks who are building a movement for LGBTQ equality in Ukraine. And when I think what is happening to their community now and how it is being devastated by this war, my heart just breaks. And that's why we're here, and that's why we're doing what we can. So we commend the Biden administration for the steps that they are taking for the announcement of TPS for Ukrainians who make it here, for the announcement that they will lift the refugee cap to allow up to 100,000 Ukrainians into this country, that they will provide extra humanitarian assistance, and that they will hold to account the perpetrators of the horrendous crimes that we are seeing being committed across Ukraine by the Russian invaders today. Those images on the television, if they don't drive you to action, I don't know what will. However, all of these steps, good as they are not enough.
Not enough.
We know there is so much more that can and must be done. And we call on President Biden to step up and to do even more. We know that there are so many problems in the US immigration system, which are a barrier to LGBTQ plus people, not only from Ukraine, but from Afghanistan and from other places around the world, that are a barrier to them being able to come to this country. We are seeing the long waits at the embassies around the world to get interviews. We are seeing the challenges that arise when LGBTQ plus refugees do leave their country and find themselves in the general populations of refugees, that the folks who are responsible for looking after them don't necessarily have the knowledge or the training to know what to do to ensure the safety of those LGBTQ plus refugees. And we know that often when folks come to other countries and get resettled, that the communities where they're placed are not necessarily, do not have the capacity to necessarily support them and ensure their safety and protection. So in all these areas, the US can and should be investing in rebuilding the refugee system that was busted by the previous inhabitant of this great house. And so we want to work with the administration to be as supportive as we can to help take these steps that need to be taken to ensure the safety of LGBTQ plus Ukrainians, both in Ukraine and as refugees. So please, President Biden, do what you can to beef up and speed up our immigration and refugee and asylum processes in embassies around the world, in the referral process. Let civil society get involved in that process. We know who the folks are who are most at risk. Let them get into the system to make referrals, and work with civil society in this country to help provide opportunities to sponsor refugees and to help get them resettled in communities all across the country. Please, thank you very much, all of you, for coming out. Thank you for listening. Lives are at stake and the time is so very, very short. Thank you.